Support and resistance, part 4. Let's talk about how support and resistance is created and break it down into its smallest component. We understand how this actually develops and how to read it. And we will then talk about this in the trend section as well as we put that together. But pivots start here with a bar adjacent to either side of it. It isn't really a pivot per se yet of any significance or strength. However, as time goes by, the more bars that are to the left and to the right create a pivot of significance. Now, we have to choose or make a decision as to how many bars we want to decide on what is a pivot of significance. And just having one on either side, while that does tell us that there has been a pickup in demand or some type of a turn here, I said that's really not significant. And at times, 2 bars on either side can be something of significance, but we're trying to find a happy medium, if you will. I've seen others that look at pivotal points in a somewhat similar way as this, and they might say, well, you need 6 bars or 12 bars or whatever it might be. But I found that having a minimum of 3 works out really well for calling it a pivot of significance. Now, how those bars form on either side, it really doesn't matter too much. The way I've drawn them to have been created in like a fluid way is the ideal. However, it doesn't always happen that way, and I don't want to get caught up in perfection, so to speak. So let's just say as long as these bars or candles that we'll be using have 3 higher lows to the left and to the right, we're going to say that this is a pivot of some significance, and we're going to recognize that an area of support or possibly resistance has been created. And here we have a retest, which creates a larger area. And here is a retest and a move up, which is creating a higher area, which is bullish. And so we have an initial formation of a reference point, and then a retest, which makes it more significant. And then as prices move up, the void concept that we spoke about, and prices begin to move sideways, it's now creating a higher level of support. And we recognize that as being very bullish, and it's can form a continuation pattern where we would be buying a breakout above here. Now, when we talked about candlesticks and we talked about tails, and we'll get into some failure pattern concepts, but just to point out here now so it's in your mind, just imagine a candle here. And let me just get my little drawing tool out here. A candle here, whereas maybe there was a tail on the bottom where it poked down under these lows and then held. And that little shock to the downside there, as we talk about support and resistance and supply and demand, the effect of that is to remove some potential supply. Let's talk about that for a second, about what that means. So as prices go sideways here, and prices, buyers now are looking at this, and let's just say they bought here, right? And they see prices go up, and they're hoping that it continues to go up to profit from a move higher. Well, this move under here would probably, so we could probably be pretty sure of that, the very nervous traders, if you will exit their long position to protect whatever profit they had here. And by that happening, it helps remove some of the potential supply of them selling as it starts to go up. So a little bit more of an advanced understanding of that supply and demand, and why we really look at these kind of shock or tail bars or little breakdowns like that as being very powerful and what we would really like to see in the type of patterns where we're buying a breakout. So here we have a situation where prices had been moving down and then fell very sharply and stabilized and then retraced again. So the trend is down. Prices are still below this major resistance area here. So as prices are in a downtrend, we look to profit by selling short. Now, as prices came up here and we get the initial reversal to the downside, this is one place that we could be selling short. But remember, this is in a void here. And so after a climactic drop, let's just back up for a second here. So because here we have a little sell set up here. But notice that it's right in the area of price resistance. And that's okay, this type of a sell setup. I'm really focused on here is sell setups after a climactic drop, not taking the first turn. Right? So here's the start of a first turn there. And this is pretty common about what happens. And then it goes further up. The really high probability setup here is the M top, or this creation of resistance where it forms a pivot and then retests it and starts to roll back over again. You can short it on the breakdown. Of course, your stop would then be up here, or you can short it here on the retest into minor resistance. Now, I'm saying here proper money management could make that first reversal okay. And we're going to look at this in depth when we get to that section. But what you would be looking to do in a situation like that would be, if you were entering here, you'd be putting your stop well up here, up above here, with this, because if it could pop back up here, and this is your major resistance, and then we would look to add to the position at the appropriate time. So just touching on that. But here, this type of setup, the move up creates the pivot, creates the retest, and then the break into the void. That is a high odds type of setup after a climactic drop. Okay. So absorbing supply by moving sideways at resistance. A lot of students from the past kind of get a little confused or caught up in the terminology. And I like to explain patterns in a way that kind of communicates the actions of what's going on there. And so when I say it's absorbing supply, what I want you to take away from that is that here, as prices came up into this resistance, remember I associated resistance with supply. This is where sellers are. And for some reason, somebody was buying here, and it went down, and somebody else bought here, and it went down again. So those longs are holding losses. So when prices come back up to resistance, where those longs are holding those losses, that is supply. So we associate resistance with supply. Those longs want to get their money back. They're happy to get their money back. Who doesn't like to break even? Now, as it comes up here and they sell into it, and notice the move up being sharp creates a void underneath. And as this now forms a pivot, and now it's retesting and it creates a larger area of support, as it's going sideways here in this area of resistance, absorbing that supply, that is bullish price action. So rather than pulling back, pulling down in price, getting pushed down, which it could pop back up, but it's not being pushed down of any significance. It's not pulling back to a minor support level. It's creating new support. So when you see sideways price action in an area of resistance after a sharp move up, power tells you that buyers continue to come in here. That's bullish. And look what's above here. There's a void. Little resistance area over here that's going to have to be dealt with. Remember what I said. This is minor in relation to this big picture over here. So I've often been asked, Greg, why would you buy here or recommend buying here when there's this resistance over here or this resistance right here? Well, because this is absorbing that supply. It's bullish price action. Why not wait until it gets above here? Well, then the question is, well, why not wait till it gets above here? How long are you going to wait? When you have a bottom forming and the price action that was going on here, look, no follow-through, volume, potent reversal, all of the things that you should be starting to recognize here, the pivots, the retests, and so on. Based on the big picture, my assumption is it's going to take this out. Right? It's the same thing when you have an uptrend. Let's look at that for a second. You have an uptrend, right? Higher highs and higher lows. And you buy the pullback to minor support. Well, you could ask yourself the same question. How do I know it's going to get above here? Because the big picture, the uptrend, and whatever pattern is going to form here suggests that it will do that. Do you know for sure it will? No, but that is trading. That is investing on technicals. You look at the big picture, you look at where the odds are, and you take a calculated risk in the odds of the big picture that it's going to continue. Absorbing supply by moving sideways. Just another example of the same thing that we just covered. Right? So here is a sloppier bottoming type of a pattern, but this is how they form at times. Momentum picks up a wide range bar and it goes sideways in the area of resistance. Buyers are absorbing that supply without prices pulling back to support. Look at the red bar ignored. Clearly a big red candle, potent, engulfing, suggesting it would pull back. And it just served to be a pullback. And if we were to look at smaller time frames, you would see the transition from red to green. We're going to talk about that when we get to multiple time frames. But buyers stepped up here. This is a little area of support in a smaller time frame, and it just pushed back up. And here in this time frame, look at that beautiful little bottoming tail bar, ignoring the topping tail bar, and off it goes back up again into the next resistance area where it reacts. Clearly, can it get through here? I don't know. This pattern suggests it will. So maybe at this point we start trail stopping, money management. Maybe we sell part of the position. We'll get into that in position and money management. Creating new support to repair the damage. At times, even in a bullish trend, something goes wrong to upset the equilibrium, so to speak. Could be a bad day in the market. Some news came out. And here we had a bullish move up. You see the momentum pushing higher. This consolidation creating support, and then a continuation move, pointing out the wide range bar here, suggesting the end of this move. And then it stalls, little topping tail bar, pointing out the volume. And then it begins to pull back into minor support. And buyers begin to step up, and the momentum slows, and it starts to turn back up again. And something happened. And as I said, it could have been a bad day. And at that point, the pattern that it's formed here, and the trend and the bullishness of the uptrend and the higher low and the moving up and so on, that's over. It's finished. But that doesn't mean it can't come back from that. So, as this tests what's now minor resistance and this topping tail forms, we really could be thinking sell short here. And we might. And it wouldn't have worked. Right? But here, as the damage gets repaired and it turns back up, let's just assume for a minute we got stopped out here. And it was like, hey, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And as this comes back up, this is a whole new scenario here. So you shake off, you've taken your calculated risk, you're over with it, and you see what's happening here, and you say, you know what, this is really bullish. Whatever happened over here, it's done. Forget about it. Sideways at the top of a wide range bar, creating a support point. It's got room up to the upside here. Get long this. You have a new reference point of support that was created where you can place a stop loss, creating resistance after a void. Look at this sideways move here. Look at the shock. Great topping tail shock. It tried to break out. What was it prior to becoming a red topping tail? Green bar. Right? It was a little breakout that failed. They're caught. Longs are caught. What do longs do when they're caught? They run. They sell. They hit the bid. And down it goes with a wide range bar igniting. And here is a nice little sell setup. Right? It just started the move down. And a little sell setup here. I'm not crazy about it, to tell you the truth, but it is what it is. That's their first sell setup, and you don't have much resistance here, but we can manage this with the right money management. But over here, where it's creating this resistance, gives you a new entry point here, and then at that point here, it's creating resistance again as it goes sideways, and we then start to say, well, look at this little move to the upside here, and that topping tail which formed a pivot. As long as it doesn't get above that, this is okay. And now your job is to look to the left. Is there a void under here? And if there is, this should be heading south. Rounding top versus a V-top. Master trader key concept. Pullbacks from a rounding top will often result in a failed pivot type of buy setup. Better to get a W pattern or a retest has better odds of advancing. So a few things going on here. Let's just back up a little bit here. As this fell sharply, and then you got a wide range bar pushing to the upside, and it came up into this resistance here. Let's clean this up for a second and get the laser pointer. V-top, which tells us that longs exited quickly to get out at that resistance. And why shouldn't they? This was in a downtrend and fell sharply. So anyone that got long here on that reversal, they're just taking their money. But here, buyers stepped up here again, V-bottom, aggressively in this little shelf of support here. Look at the reaction to the high. Bullish price action at resistance, going sideways there. And then as it comes up into this resistance area and begins to form this top, it looked like it was going to push higher, never by this type of a continuation pattern in the face of resistance. And as it poked up here, it then created this resistance area and this high pivot, and then started to break to the downside. So pullbacks into this support, you don't want to buy those in the face of this rounding top. And waiting for a retest pattern, there are two concepts going on here. Let me just draw it over here, and that would be, here's your rounding top, which is bearish, and as it pulls back by going sideways, time moves prices away from this reference point, or what created uncertainty here, little breakout that failed and the move back down. So as you move away from bearish patterns, they become less potent or significant over time. And just go a little further with it, and as it went sideways over time, let's just extend it and get further away from that. And where we would say, well, do we want to buy this breakout that's moving higher? Well, what about this resistance? Well, I would say, if we were looking at a daily chart, and I would say, well, 3 months went by. I don't really care about this anymore. It might stall there, but I want to trade this in the void. And when it gets there, we'll see what it does. Okay. Gap creates a void, right? And the retest creates resistance. So here was a gap down, There was a gap down under this support, and now there's this big void here. Sometimes prices will get up into this area, and that would be an ideal place to put on a short position up there. But what this tells us is that this was creating a resistance here, and we don't have bars to the left over here, but let's just use some common sense here and be a little flexible and say, well, here's this big gap down, and we got the bars here to the right, and we're just going to call this, I won't call it a pivot, I'll call it a reference point that others are going to focus on as a probable selling point. And here where it rolls back over again, this is where you want to sell it short. 3 bars are the same as a topping tail. So when you see this pattern, it may, say it looks a little foreign to you maybe, or you don't recognize it as a sell setup. But when I tell you there's 3 bars and you think about the retracement concept here as a topping tail, if you visualize that, you'd probably say, I got it, Greg, I see it. Yes, I do see it, and I will sell that short based on that pattern that has created resistance after a very bearish gap down. And then as it moves down, we don't know why it popped back up here, but it could be market related. Maybe there was some support here. We're always looking to the left to see where there might be a reaction, transfer of support that becomes resistance. Now, another little bit of an advanced concept here, but what you really want to think about here is the fact that this bullish pattern broke down, right? So here's 2 pivots, and we'll talk about this in the trend section, but the break of 2 pivots is bearish, breaking down below this significant support area now. And as it came down, it went to the next support area, and it stopped. And you can see it stopped right here, big green bar. And so here is a support area where possibly you could build up new support to try and move back up into this void here. And because as prices moved down, it created this void. And buyers could step up here. It formed a pivot, and there was a retest, and prices could have started to move up over here, but they didn't. So at this area of support where those that want to get long recognize this and they start to accumulate here, you're actually having a supply coming in and building up a new resistance area. Now you might be saying, well, when do I know it's resistance, Greg? You know it's resistance after it breaks down, after the fact, right? We wouldn't know that it's actual. We know that it's support once it forms a pivot and then once it retests, but we would not go long something like this after such a breakdown. So once it breaks, it's clear that there's resistance here, and here's a nice little sell setup right over here. Right? Notice the topping tail, little shock. Think about what it was prior to a topping tail. Think about what preceded it, the retest, the move up. It was a green candle. As buyers stepped up here, they got caught. And now they're saying this isn't working. This reversal set up here in this area of support, and after this gap reversal and coming down to retest it, and as longs are caught, it's breaking. Let me get my money back. Let me be done with this thing. It's not working. And if there's a void below, which we're always going to look for, hey, sell it short. All right, a review. Minor support is the high prior to a higher high. Major support is the low prior to the higher high. The strongest of trends, they'll reverse at minor support. New support within a void starts with the pivot. And let me just say, the strongest of strongest trends will not pull back to minor support. They will create support. And let's just, we talked about that a little bit, but I like to reinforce these things. And so, uptrend, and rather than pull back to minor support, it pivots, it retests, it goes sideways, and back up again. It creates new support. It doesn't pull back to minor support. And so you might be thinking, normal thought, this is a little extended. I don't want to buy here. I don't blame you. Neither do I. But after it creates a new support point, it tells me that demand is strong enough to create this support, and then I am willing to buy it. And of course, you're going to look at the individual candles that form in this area. Is there a little bottoming tail bar or a long, big bottoming tail bar that takes out some of that potential supply, shakes out those weak hands? So as we look at bar by bar and we put that in the context of a trend, which we're going to be getting to trends, in a strong trend and creating support, is there a void above? All of these things coming together guide us to high probability trading setups or swing trades or core trades. Right? It's all related to the time frame that we're looking at. Ideal uptrends form V tops and V bottoms, right, at minor support, or they create new support. Rounding or square tops within an uptrend display distribution. Check multiple time frames. MTF, check multiple time frames. Prices moving sideways at resistance is bullish. And prices going sideways at support after a downtrend, if it cannot go up, it's bearish, and you look for lower prices. That's the end of support and resistance. You probably want to review it again. There's a lot of great information there. And I'll tell you, as we get through the information here and you're taking the course, I don't know that you want to wait till the end of the course. There's a lot of information, but you're always welcome to email with questions about a particular concept if you need some clarification. Right? Hope you're enjoying this, and you're always welcome to email with some accolades and, if you're having some light bulb moments, really like that.